Hey there, fourth grade. It's Mr. Remedies coming to you today with our reading mini lesson. Now, this week we've been discussing all about author's purpose. Yesterday we discussed a little bit about messages in stories and fiction text. Today, as you can see on your screen, we're talking and discussing that all about how nonfiction texts have messages as well. So let's move on to our learning goals, success criteria, and dive right in. Our learning goal for today is that we are learning to infer messages in nonfiction text. Along the way, we got count them, three success criteria. Much like yesterday, I can define message, I can define nonfiction, and I can still use text evidence to make inferences. Now that we know where we're headed, let's dive into some vocabulary and then head on over to some examples. All right, vocabulary for today, 2 words. Both of them are going to be a review. First word, nonfiction. Nonfiction is text that is based on facts and actual events, not imagined. Okay. Message. The definition didn't change from yesterday. The message is what the author wants us as readers to take away from the text. Right. It's the big idea that the author is trying to get us to learn. Right. Now that we have that out of the way, let's dive right on into some examples. Our first example is Parrots over Puerto Rico, which we used in our lesson about author's purpose, so this should be fresh in your memory. But if it's not, what was this text about? Well, we remember it was about the history of Puerto Rican parrots. It was about how settlers and other animals killed the parrots. And it was about how people try to protect the parrots. Okay, so when we look at finding the message for nonfiction text, we really have to ask ourselves, what is the author's message? We begin to think to ourselves, what did the info help me understand? Okay. What did all those facts, what did all that information help me understand once I was done reading the text? Okay? For this one, we can infer that the author's message is that some animals are endangered because of the actions of humans. Okay? We see that in the hunting of the parrots by the humans, and the hunting of those parrots by other animals because humans brought those animals to the island of Puerto Rico. We also can infer that the author's message is that humans can work together to save endangered animals, especially when we look at how that group of scientists came together to kind of save and make sure that the parrots had a good environment to live in and to start to repopulate. Okay. So here we see, just like we saw yesterday, that the author has 2 potential messages for this nonfiction text. Let's scoot on over to our second example. Our second example, wonderful book, hands around the library. To jog our memory, what this story is about. It's about people in Egypt marching for their freedom. At the beginning of the book, it says that freedom is not something that was talked about. It was not something that was offered to many of the people in Egypt during the time of this book. And the majority of the book is centered around a group of people protecting their valued library by holding hands and surrounding it and kind of protecting it from being destroyed or vandalized by those people marching for their freedom. So again, we want to ask ourselves, what is the author's message? Thinking to ourselves, what did the info help me understand? What did I understand, not just facts-wise, but what was the big idea that the author was trying to get across to me? Using the text evidence, I can infer that the author's message is that people can work together to create change. We see that in the fact that the library director starts to protect the library, but then he is joined by many people, often one at a time. We can infer that the author's message is that books and libraries are worth saving. Very early in the book, it says that people couldn't really speak about freedom. They didn't really know what freedom was about unless they saw it on the internet or they read it in books that they got from the library. And because the library was such a safe place that they couldn't really speak about freedom other than in the library. So people valued this library, right? And we see that by the fact that people held hands and surrounded it and protected it from being destroyed. So we can definitely infer that the author's message is that books and libraries are worth saving. And we can even infer that the love of books can unite people, So it says in the books that people from all religions and races joined hands to protect the library. And that shared love of reading united those people. So I think this is a wonderful book with factual information based on a true story that happened, as the book said, not too long ago, with a bunch of different messages for the reader. Let's move. How about we move on to another example? Boom, that's a great idea, guys. Our last example, we're revisiting another text we saw early in the week. This time we're going back to One Hand. Remember our book One Hand? What happens in the story? A boy named Kojo and a loan he got to buy a hen. Story is also about the hard work that Kojo did to help his family and achieve his dream. And finally, and maybe most importantly, the story is about how big an effect Kojo's farm, which he started with a loan, remember, had on many people throughout his family, close co-workers, and eventually his community and country. So we're, again, always thinking to ourselves, what's the author's message? Again, what did the info help me understand? Again, not so much about the facts that this man started a farm that employed many people and then had a big impact, but what's the big idea? What's the big idea, the universal truth, the life lesson that the author wants me to understand? I can use the text evidence to kind of infer, not to kind of infer, I can definitely infer that the author's message is that change happens one person at a time. One person loaned Kojo's family money, and one by one, his family took that money and used it to buy something that would make them more money. Okay? I can infer that a little help can make a big difference. It was not a large amount of money that Kojo borrowed to buy the one brown hen, but that little seed, that little money had a big impact. Right? And finally, we can infer that do what you can to help others is one of the author's message. Right? It was not a very big loan. It was not a very big spectacle at all. Just something small, something that you can do, can have a great impact on that person because you help that person. Right? And helping people makes everything that much more pleasant, that much more awesome, and that's a good lesson to learn. That's a good message to receive. Now that we've looked at some examples, let's head on over to a review. Reviewing today's lesson, we know that nonfiction text has a message as well. Okay, messages aren't just reserved for fictional stories, but that nonfiction text can have a message. Right? Same as yesterday, though, that the message of a story or the message of a text is what the author wants us as the reader to learn or take away from the text experience. Okay, nonfiction text can have many messages, and you know what? We saw that in all three of our examples today. Okay, and I think that's pretty cool because I like learning many different things, and if I can do that from one text, I think that's pretty awesome. Right? And the message of a nonfiction text is like the big idea that author wants us to learn, not so much about the actual factual information that appears in the text. All right. You know what, guys? This is A great skill to have. Learning to infer messages provides so much benefit for you guys, not just in reading class in the fourth grade, but well beyond that. Okay. I know that all across Copper's Cove, you guys have just been absolutely rocking it. Okay. I have zero doubt of that. So I've been Miss Remedies. I've been awesome. I just said that I know every single one of you have been amazing. Don't you ever forget that. And we will see you next time. Boom.